Welcome back to the news. Right, here's the deal. The UK CMA basically wants Activision Blizzard King to split up. Yeah.
Yeah, they have realized that, or they've discovered based on some surprising statistics that they actually managed to get a marketing thing to do. And like the kind of surveys, the kind of statistics that go, oh, this actually kind of materially changes things. This puts what we think is, oh yeah, surely this will happen into like actual solid numbers. And they found these statistics out, and they've looked at what Microsoft have been saying about, oh, this is all fine, and went, no, we're going to call your bluff. We see that you're technically trying to pull the wool over our eyes by talking about Call of Duty so much. We know what you're really after. And they've ended up giving because they like have remedies of how we're going to make this situation right, because they're afraid of what this merger could do. And some of the remedies are stuff that I literally, like, we've been thinking about it since this news was announced. Other people think about it. People have been reporting on it. All of the games industry sources. And no one's had this like solution yet. I go, this could actually, it's not likely to happen, but if something does happen on this front, it'll be the greatest news we could possibly get.
So they had the joy of going through 3 million internal documents between the two companies. Jeez. I'm sure that was possible. And also a independently ran survey of UK gamers, specifically 40,000 PlayStation COD gamers. And yeah, they did that. Mm-hmm. Now they're going to talk about their problems. So let's talk about their problems. Ultimately, they think that the deal must be opposed for 2 reasons. Reason number 1 is cloud gaming. Reason number 2 is the provision of gaming consoles. Funny enough, not exactly just Call of Duty. The TLDR, right, is that having existing popular games on the cloud services is going to be important for those services to grow. Therefore, Microsoft would benefit from having their games on their cloud service. I know, I mean, how could we possibly put this obvious thing together? But the point is, COD's just on the cloud service. That will help them dominate that market. They say Microsoft already accounts for an estimated 60 to 70% of global cloud gaming services. And I suppose they don't want that number to be higher, because then it sort of stops really looking as much like competition.
Yeah, that's the thing that we don't think about very much, because we're obviously focused on the side of gaming we enjoy mostly. Mm-hmm. And obviously people watching, the same thing of like, what is this going to mean for the consoles? What's this going to mean for, Call of Duty? What's going to mean for the future of things? But I think cloud gaming being a future for, not maybe with how you engage with video games yet, maybe you will in the future, maybe you won't. But it's that thing of, if this is an emerging market, the CMA are going to look and go, so there's an emerging market and you want to have complete control of it. We're not going to let that happen like the entire world did with all of the other tech markets. We're going to be afraid. We're going to be kind of on guard for this stuff. I think that's where you look and go, yeah, that makes sense to be defensive on that front. But then you look at the the provision of gaming console segment, and they basically just go, yeah, there is material incentive for ABK games exclusive to Xbox. It might not be immediate, it'll be eventual. That's a thing that obviously they've talked about loads, but they're going that Microsoft have or explicitly done this previously with Bethesda, and go, yeah, this is a pattern. There's evidence, and just this will reduce competition, and this is what they're for, right?
If this is being done by just some person who doesn't really understand gaming, but it still is, they yanked the Skyrim.
Yeah,
they'll still understand that, right? So, yeah, I mean, they kind of hurt themselves in the future by doing that so quickly and so bullishly.
Yeah, exactly. But then the thing that I think, the quote I think that resonates with people most from this is them saying that this could result in all gamers seeing higher prices, reduced range, lower quality, and worse service in gaming consoles over time, which is obviously the fear. But even you look at, say, the price hike recently.
Yeah.
And that was pushed through by, I think it was Sony did it first.
It was.
With them having their massive market. And Sony are definitely the market leaders in a bunch of ways, especially in like the quality prestige game angle. And they go, hey, our games are $70 now. And everyone's like, sure. Do whatever, and then you see, other games are now $70, and then you look at Tears of the Kingdom there, $70 was on the eShop, and everyone going, wait, Nintendo's first $70 game? If Sony didn't have the market strength they had, they wouldn't be able to do that. So this isn't saying that, you could immediately hear that and go, then Microsoft should take Sony down a peg and save us all. But I think it comes across that if Microsoft had the market share that Sony had, they'd be able to say, 70, 75, 80, and then no one could stop them, and everyone else would do that. And it would just be this, honestly, a hellscape of, games are now worse because someone has controlled the market.
Yeah, and to dive into that, they actually seem to vaguely understand how the industry tends to work, which is quite shocking. They say, right, that, you've got the network effect, so the bigger Xbox Live is, and the more your friends use it, and the more value Xbox Live is. And then the indirect network effects basically result in a kind of like a self-reinforcing feedback loop that just, it'll just make the thing bigger, right? So if you basically just have Xbox Live versus PSN, they would feel if there was, things being done that would unduly give Xbox an advantage, then the already existing problem of it being super hard to break into the market would just get even harder. You may have noticed we don't really have companies doing game consoles outside of like niche retro stuff. It's just PC or the big two. And there's a reason why it's just the big two. And they understand that down to the actual individual game level, where they essentially say, look, big AAA games do actually account for most of user time and most of user spend. It's a handful of games, including Call of Duty, that account for the majority of game time and revenues on both of the consoles. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty simple. It's just, you've got... In this sense, it's like, you can get Call of Duty, Fallout, Elder Scrolls.
Yeah, I think we obviously look at the more holistic view because we're the people who play more video games. So like, Game Pass, and what does it mean for Game Pass? What does it mean for because the idea of Stray, okay, well that's a PlayStation exclusive, but to the vast majority, to the real big money, that doesn't matter. That's all us being, niche gamers enjoying the hobby as opposed to people who dive in, but that obviously is for where most of the money is. Where, it's like cinephiles aren't running the film industry. It's people who go and see whatever big, interesting movie is out. They're the ones who decide all the trends, and it's the same here. And the CMA are like, they know that enough that they're able to stand their ground and go, we're not going to buy any of your utter bullshit about all this variance and all this quality, all this different stuff. We know the important part is the big game, and we know that you're buying the big game. We don't particularly want that to happen, to be honest.
They're the sort of body that... they want to be thinking 20 years into the future, which I think is why Phil Spencer's saying, a decade of Xbox or a decade of Call of Duty and PlayStation. The CMA is almost going to see that as a confirmation that it will go away in 10 years.
It's them. They'll just go, okay, so you've putting a ticking time bomb on PlayStation that's got an 11-year countdown then? Sweet. No worries. And that's the thing where I think it's nice to have people think in these terms, because even I think in the games industry, we think about personal experience an awful lot. Yes. We kind of think of 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. Someone going, but what about 20? And you go, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, this is like plate tectonics.
Yeah.
So, cloud then. Well, they basically see, right, deploying a cloud service does have costs, but it is different to just building a console meant for AAA games. So, they view cloud as being a potential way for new people to enter this market and increase competition. But then they see, Stadia failed. That doesn't look good. Yeah, and that actually, that adds further ammunition. Obviously, Amazon Luna hasn't failed yet, but I can't imagine that anybody's actually using Amazon Luna.
Luna hasn't failed, but there is news recently that it's dropped a whole bunch of games from its service, and it looks like a very slow and quiet wind down kind of beginning, as opposed to anything else. That might be me reading into it a little bit, but it is very much, they seem to have cut their investment in that to a degree, which just kind of goes to show, if Google and Amazon say, we're the leaders in tech, we're the leaders in online shopping and stuff, we will get into this market. We failed. Then who can?
Yeah.
And who will be able to?
And the CMA...
If Microsoft go, especially when you think about because I think the analogy is always you look at the phones, and obviously cloud phones, etc. But you go, well, imagine if Google never stepped into the ring with Android. Imagine if it was just iPhone. And you could see the damage that would theoretically do. And it's the same thing of, could that happen with cloud?
It would either be that or the WebOS utopia that all the PAM fans really wanted to have happen. For cloud, they see that as a way to compete and access customers who are maybe not having consoles or that sort of thing.
Yep.
Widening that pool of potential customers. But if you reduce competition specifically in what they see as the big new growth area, then that's going to look even worse. Mm-hmm. And as for Nintendo, the CMA basically said Call of Duty on Switch, Lamau. They may as well have just said that. COD has not been on the Switch. It's not been on Nintendo stuff in such a long time. Basically say that there's no evidence to suggest that the console would be technically capable of doing so with a similar quality of gameplay as the other consoles.
Which I'm going to suggest is a little bit funny, because they talk about cloud gaming being the future, And then they completely ignore that the Switch is a load of games that are actually cloud ran. Like, is it Hitman? And there's another like pretty large game that runs there, and it's like cloud based and supported that way, which I think is interesting. But it goes to show that the CMA actually know what they're talking about, because anyone will go, yeah, Nintendo will exist in the world of their own, and especially as that recent Direct kind of showed, they can do whatever they want, but it's not going to matter to PlayStation or Xbox. People go, oh yeah, this is just a separate segment of the market. Sure, it's a massive segment of the market, and a lot of people are very happily there. But I think no one goes, oh, will I buy a PlayStation or a Switch? That's almost never a consideration. Maybe for like a family who's got like someone who's maybe like 8 or 9, like, well, which side of the age range are they on? But I think most people are just going, it's do you either get the mature games or the more fun games, let's say. Let's say on average. But that Direct was very good, so forgive me for being a little bit on their side today. I think that's a little bit just, the CMA know what they're talking about. Nintendo don't matter. It's the PlayStation versus Xbox war for who controls that side. Nintendo are dominant in their side, but it's not 80, 70, 80% of the market like Microsoft are ultimately aiming for.
And with Blizzard, even though, yes, Blizzard's got its 45 million monthly active users, they basically say that they've found some evidence that Activision has some PC games, in particular World of Warcraft, that are popular and could be relevant to cloud gaming. So it's quite funny, because there's a lot of us who don't really take the cloud gaming seriously in terms of our own experience, yet here we do have all of these very large businesses and regulatory bodies taking cloud gaming super seriously. And then it's like, we all think that's absurd. And then you think, well, okay, 20 years in the future, when we are all on, I don't know, 10 gig up, 10 gig down with fucking 10 ping.
8G, your phone leg.
And then some crazy stuff. I suppose that's the thing about these regulatory bodies. And I know that kind of thing, like, oh, you can play whatever game anywhere on a screen with your eyeballs. That's going to seem completely absurd to us. And yes, Moore's Law is slowing down, but compare the world right now to the year 2002, and, stuff that could be a bit like sci-fi shit could be going on in 20 years. And a body like this, even if it doesn't have, like, all of the necessary expertise, I've got to imagine that they will want to think about that.
Yeah, I think it's also to be a pretty downer about video games for a moment. I think if you look at the way things are largely going, the current culture of video games that you and I absolutely love to play a video game in a very atmospheric situation. You're in your house, you've got your big TV, you've got your nice monitor, you're very there. Everything is immersive. It's a good experience. You're comfy, no one's distracting you, you're not on a train. But at the same time, I think, not to say we'll be dead in 20 years, but we'll be a substantially smaller part of overall gaming culture. Will be aging, and new cultures and new ways of play could theoretically come in. I'm not saying I want them to or I would like it. It's more the case of things will inevitably change, and the change could be very much that way, and they're trying to get ahead of it. But I think we're at... Yeah. As
for console choice, basically they say that of the 40,000 PlayStation Call of Duty gamers, 24% of them would move away from the PlayStation if this deal was to go through, and Call of Duty would no longer, be available on that platform.
And that's insane. That 24, literally going, oh yeah, we bought this company and then we took 24% of your market share.
Well, it's 24% of their Call of Duty playing PlayStation people, but they say that COD accounts for a significant proportion of the overall game time on PlayStation.
So if you say significant, even to undersell it and say maybe that's a third of people. Maybe, I don't know if that's accurate enough, but let's use it as a thought experiment. 30% of our third are PlayStation COD gamers. 24% of that third go. That's not 24%. That's not gone. It's being shifted. So I don't know if you've ever played Reversi or Go, where, when you steal someone's pieces, it's not one down from them. It's the gap is now 2.
Yes.
So that would be 24%. That's a 48% shift, because it's 24 away from Sony and 24 on to Microsoft, which even at a third, you cut that down to, what is that, 8%? That's still a 16% shift in the market, which is crazy. And that puts, a 16% shift in the market could turn someone into a monopoly. And that's the thing, that they have that. And this isn't just we found people on the street. The survey is a random sample of 40,000 PlayStation COD gamers who played at least 10 hours or spent at least $100 on the game between July 2021 and June 2023. Or sorry, June 2022. So that's not just random people. That is how much of the actual dedicated business. Obviously, it might last for 10 hours, but they're trying to be reasonable enough. But the $100 part is like, I don't know the numbers, but you're looking at thousands of, not hundreds of thousands of dollars being shifted over immediately, all because they said, yeah, we'll just buy the company. You're like, that's how it works. I don't know if people fully agree with that.
Yeah. So as for the remedies, they basically outline that there are two forms, right? Structural and behavioral. Structural ones are just kind of done. The structure changes. They don't need to be as monitored and enforced as much after that. But then the behavioral ones do involve more upkeep. So to go to these then, which this is the fun, right? A partial divestiture of Activision Blizzard Inc. ahead of the merger completing. This may be a divestiture of the business associated with Call of Duty, divestiture of the Activision segment of Activision Blizzard, basically free Blizzard, and divestiture of the Activision segment and the Blizzard segment of Activision Blizzard Inc., which I suppose would just leave it being Inc. No. That would include the business associated with Call of Duty and World of Warcraft, or the prohibition of the merger.
Which is where we have to think, well, how do you divest Activision and Blizzard then? And you go, oh, AB isn't just AB, it's ABK. It's King. And you look at Microsoft as a whole, and Microsoft very much have a lot of data. They have the Azure platform. They have analytics from every Windows PC that exists, which is most PCs, especially for the personal side, especially for the gaming side. It's effectively all of them. So they have all this data, and King have all this data mobile, all this data for cloud gaming, all this data for user behavior, because King are massive. King are absolutely obscenely huge. So they're just walking around with all this data, and I think the CMA kind of recognize that and go, so you're talking about Activision Blizzard, and you're talking about getting Activision, you're talking about Call of Duty, you're talking about all this, and you're talking about how much the IP will be very good to you. You haven't mentioned King very much. The kind of silent killer for if you look at like the future of the games industry and you think of like the cloud game, you think of like new audience pickup, Kings are all the value lies there. Call of Duty, obviously important for 10 years, maybe 20, but if you're looking 20 to 30, King's the important one, because they're the ones who want, we know how people act. We've got terabytes and terabytes, not petabytes, not exabytes of data on how people do things.
We make a bejeweled level, and that equals millions of dollars.
Yeah, and they know exactly how to do that. So
it makes a store mount in World of Warcraft look like a joke.
Yeah, so it feels like Microsoft are kind of trying to brush that under the rug by having all this talk about, Call of Duty, Activision. It's like, we actually kind of want the really big one. And the CMA are kind of onto that a little bit when they're going, you can have the whole thing without Call of Duty. You can have the whole thing without Activision as a whole. That's fine, because obviously that includes Call of Duty, etc. And you can have just King. You cannot have all three. And it's interesting that they're kind of going for that. Because you imagine a world where they go, you can have King but not Activision Blizzard. And I don't know, if, that seemed to me as like, I never even vaguely considered that as a possibility.
Yeah.
But the fact that they're saying that.
Yeah, like Microsoft themselves have been talking up to regulators that like the Call of Duty bit's not the one they're the most concerned about.
Yeah.
That they really want to take advantage of King. Yeah. Strong mobile base, which Microsoft doesn't have. Even in the way that like Sony's got some gacha on the go, Microsoft doesn't have that. Now, there are the behavioral remedies, which basically, they actually don't propose any of these, but they don't rule them out. They say that these would only be necessary if a divestiture is not feasible, which could be, as an example, right, there needs to be a prospective purchaser of, say, Activision Publishing, to get Call of Duty, that is independent of the parties, has got the necessary capability to compete. So and also the commitment to competing and not being able to further any competition concerns, which I suppose the first name that appears in my head is like Take-Two.
I feel like if
Take-Two are fairly third-party feeling.
If they'd Call of Duty, they'd be separate from platforms, but they'd also be a behemoth. But that would be fine.
Hey, we own COD and GTA.
Yeah, that would be... Yeah, if we just bought FIFA, we'd own every video game that anyone plays. At least for the grand scheme of things. Or maybe have to get Fortnite now. But that's more or less... Like, that would be insane. But I had a funny thought. If you're concerned about Call of Duty being competitive advantage, I know who to give it to. Give it to Square Enix. Because if you give it to Square Enix, then it would no longer be competitive within 2 years. They'd run it into the ground and would all be free. and it'd be fine. It'd be solved. I don't know if I could see this happening, but you could see Take-Two or Embracer starting to going, what's that? Call of Duty's for sale? Ooh, we would very much enjoy that.
Yeah, and how much is that going to cost, and can they fund it? Because like they're big
That's the
companies,
problem,
but 69 billion is the proposed amount for this entire acquisition. And yes, I suppose selling Just God, it wouldn't be all of that, but it would be a lot.
It'd be like half of it probably, knowing how much King's worth and stuff.
On the whole behavioral thing, they do acknowledge that during their investigation, Microsoft said that it offered, right, the long-term agreements with the other game platform holders, including Nintendo, Steam, and Sony, to supply them with Call of Duty post-merger. And they basically say that that is something they'll consider as a part of their remedies process rather than their competitive assessment. So essentially, they've done their big assessment. This is what they've said, and those other things that have been brought up, they can bring those in after, because everything has got to go through a process, which I suppose makes sense given the stakes here are really quite massive indeed. So, as for the responses then, like overall, what is this? Basically, it's a shot across the bow, a big shot across the bow, saying, hey, we're really serious. Now, what sort of responses happened? Well, likely being aware that this was coming, Bobby pointed at comments. Okay, so Rishi Sunak has, and this isn't really just him. I remember Dominic Cummings was all talking about, we kind of need big tech in England and all that. And Rishi Sunak recently talked about the UK being the Silicon Valley of Europe. I would imagine what they would be trying to get at there is something along the lines of maybe the European regulatory environment not being, maybe being complex, slow, and not as open for business. I suppose that's maybe it. It's like that wing of the party is going to be wanting to talk up all of the things that they can do now that they're no longer tied to the EU in such a way. So he's talked about becoming the Silicon Valley of Europe, and Bobby Kotick says, if this can't get through, the UK is not going to be a Silicon Valley. It's going to be a Death Valley. Which is just Bobby being Bobby and talking, I don't want to say out his ass, but very much like in grand schemes going, I am the mobster. Either
if
that,
you don't let this happen, it'll be bad news for you.
Either that, or Bobby's going to nuke the UK and turn it into a desert. Maybe that's what he's going to do. Who knows? He's got access to a lot of private jets. Maybe he'll just take matters into his own hands.
I wouldn't, considering the other things he's threatened, I wouldn't put it past him. That's
and he definitely, Bobby was in he was in a fun, feisty mood, and we love feisty Bobby. Feisty Bobby's fun. He also said Sony won't return our calls, and this is the time when we'd normally be talking about future opportunities.
Which I think that means, if you want something specific, that means that, and this is obviously going to be the case, the next Call of Duty won't have PS5 exclusive DLC. Sony are kind of like, they're clearly, obviously they have their own incentives to not want this to happen.
Sony will want to be as unreasonable as they possibly can, purely because it makes the most financial sense for them to push to push as far back against this as they possibly can. Yeah. Which, if any of us were in Sony's position, I think we'd basically do the same.
Yeah, they'll be telling the CMA that, like, if Microsoft buy Activision Blizzard, it means all kittens will be kicked.
Yes.
Like that kind of really, not literally, but like the unreasonable kind of, oh no, this is unspeakably bad. This is opening the gates of hell upon video games as we know it, which, obviously isn't quite true.
Yeah, and like the Bobby framing to staff, he did kind of have this internal email.
Oh, the propaganda.
Where he's overall just downplaying things, and he's essentially saying, like, look, this is part of the process. That these things are being said means we're moving through the process, and that is good. Mm-hmm. Which actually, in a way, is true. It just may leave out some of the, fun texture that may end up being, being a pain in his arse. As for Microsoft, then, they've talked about their commitment of Call of Duty to everywhere. 70, we've been talking about 25%. They say 75% of respondents in their public consultation agree that the deal is good for the competition of UK gaming. And reiterating those equal access claims, he added, what does 100% mean? When we say equal, we mean it. 10 years of parity on content, pricing, features, quality, playability.
Yes.
10 years.
Yep.
To which they say, sorry, we're talking about a 15 to 20 year cycle, actually, so that's irrelevant to us. Mm-hmm. Then as for them, they've just talked about, yes, these are provisional filings, which means they've set forth their concerns in writing and both parties have a chance to respond. Which, like, in a way, that is true. In the way that this offer that Microsoft have to the rest of the industry was not a part of the Phase 2 investigation. It's going to be a part of the response process to that. So overall, where does this basically leave us then? Well, if you have been playing Blizzard games for a while and you've been, leaving comments being like, we need to break up Activision Blizzard, this is, okay, it's probably not going to happen.
No, but
there are interests that are very powerful that want this to happen.
Yeah.
But it's the closest we'll get. And who knows, maybe the less probable thing will happen because, like, that's how probability works.
Yeah, there's something about it to me that this, I think, is the first time this has been seriously suggested. Everyone else has been talking, okay, well, let's investigate, let's think about this, let's see what the impact are. Should this merger as a whole be let through? And now someone's went, could split them up. And you go, that's not a bad idea. And you go, well, okay, well, now that idea is in the heads of, not necessarily of, like, us, because who are we? We're just pundits online and viewers of people who play video games, etc. But I think when you look at it from the perspective of all of the other organizations that are involved in this, the FTC, they might look at that and go, I mean, they've probably thought it internally, but if it's like a public idea, then, I don't want to start talking about the nature of chaos magic, but now the idea exists, it can be thought about, it can be manifested by these people going, you know what? The CMA said you should probably not have Activision if you want Blizzard and King, or if you want King, you can throw Blizzard out, who cares? But I think now that the FTC might have that in their head, now that the people in Brussels might have that in their head, it could be more of the discussion going forward. Although I do think they wanted this wrapped up by June, I think, this year.
Good luck.
I don't think that's going to happen considering it's February and they're going, yeah, we need to get some more information in here. Which means we're going to have Bobby at the head of Activision Blizzard King for longer than we'd like. I think people would have been very happy if this had been wrapped up and he'd been gone.
Oh, the Bobster's
about a week after. Yeah, he's undefeatable. His time will surely come. But until then, I think we just have to wait and see. Maybe like, I don't know how many of you viewers really actually enjoy Call of Duty and enjoy Activision's output, which is Call of Duty and a new Crash game, I guess. Maybe they'll make some Spyro eventually. But I think the idea of Activision been spun out and sitting on its own being the Call of Duty machine, and Blizzard going under Microsoft so they can get like Blizzard IP and bring that up, I think that would be sick. That's what I want.
It probably would be. Again, it's that tricky thing, right? And we don't want to be all like, my personal position and my public position and my private position are different. You kind of do want those to be the same, don't you?
Yeah.
It's almost this like my objective, me speaking as a thinking person opinion is this. In the same way that you might be like, you know what? I know all of these things about ice cream and it's bad and I shouldn't have it. But I want some, so I'm going to have it. It's a bit like that. It's like, is Microsoft gobbling everything up probably bad? It's like, yeah, okay,
definitely.
Yeah, probably bad. But will it increase the chances of StarCraft 3? And a lot of people say, yes. And I care about StarCraft 3 more than I care about stuff that's for nerds and lawyers.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And you can't... Equally, you can't knock that perspective, really.
Yeah, that's why I think it's...
You only have a few shots around the sun. Yeah. Why not increase your chances of StarCraft 3 existing during a few of them?
Yeah, exactly. That's why I think if anyone asks me now, I will say, yeah, they should divest Activision, have the Call of Duty machine running rampant by itself, and then Microsoft can do whatever they want with King, because we're going into technological hell. The Torment Nexus is already built. It's too late. Keeping Microsoft away from King won't help us. So at least if Microsoft get Blizzard, then... that's sweet. And I would have thought differently a month ago. However, and again, I'm sorry I've talked about it in every single video since it's come out, but Hi-Fi Rush, because Xbox released that. And obviously it wasn't, or like news had come out, the director talked about it, it wasn't greenlit under Xbox, it was greenlit ahead of that deal. And then Xbox came in, but they didn't cancel it. They didn't come in and say, oh, what's that, you're making a video game? It's not a live service, get rid of that. Go make The Evil Within a multiplayer shooter or something. Go make an Evil Within Dead by Daylight. Go do that instead. And that's what you could have expected. So the idea of a Blizzard under Microsoft and Activision doing whatever the hell they want to, somewhere else and it not ended up being the death of competition in the market, I'm like, that sounds like you're onto something, CMA. That's a pretty good idea. Let's go for that one. Probably won't happen, but if I'm trying to think of how to describe the wishes you make at shrines in Japan. If I made one of those, it would just be, please let this happen. For this year, please let this happen. Thank you very much. That would be my wish. That'd be my prayer. Just give us Blizzard under Microsoft and tell Activision to go itself.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Yeah, why not? Sure. Yeah, more budget for WoW. Let's just as long as they don't Halo Infinite.
Oh yeah.
Well, that would be unfortunate.
They say they've learned those lessons.
They say.
Technically.
They say.
Maybe that won't happen again.
Who knows?
I can't wait for Fable.
No, you're not going to make it to then. None of us are.
Oh dear. Yeah.
So there you go. That's the situation. Certainly something that maybe many of us would have expected. I suppose one of the expectations that people had was perhaps a legally binding agreement. So not just we'll put Call of Duty over there, but some sort of legally binding agreement. And maybe that would be enough for it to get through. I think this is perhaps, and I suppose what would that be? That would be a behavioral remedy. But no, they immediately talked about structural remedies. So I just think that's quite interesting. More of a spanner in the works than maybe some of us anticipated in this story. So that's it for that. If you want to check out the game that we are currently developing and will be coming out in oh my God, 2 weeks and 1 day, then you can check out The Pale Beyond over on Steam. And with that said, thank you for checking us out. Consider watching this video next. We'll see you next time.